So there was a big shift. It's recognised by critical historians that that was a shocking mistake, political mistake for the British to make, to do that. But then the further one apparently was in May, a month after the rising about, something like 1,300 people had been arrested, all without trial, and they were taken away for internment, and they were marched down to the boat in Dublin, and Dad was among that crowd. And he says when that happened, that really turned people again, that seeing that many people just taken away without trial to internment, and spent a year in prison in Wales, also in the famous Dartmoor prison. There was an escape from Dartmoor over Christmas, but he had the flu and he couldn't make it. Not sure if they got away fully or not. And they came out on amnesty then a year later. And again, he was rearrested in 1918 under suspicion of, some suspicion of the German plot, they called it, and maybe these people are working underground again. And spent 9 months in an internment camp up in the north of Ireland. So all these kind of things. So when I grew up with all of this in the 30s, 40s, my dad never spoke about the Civil War time. Much later in life, he did say to me, I felt they should have gone with the vote. There was a very tight vote. See, the Irish set up their own parliament and everything. And the British let them do it for quite a while. But in fact, it was a narrow vote of the main representatives of, it was 7 votes, something like 57 to 64 in favour of accepting, and the large minority, including De Valera. Although De Valera tried to accept it, but his major blokes wouldn't go along with it, and that just led to civil war, which went on for a year. And a lot of sad stuff happened in the Civil War, including the assassination of Michael Collins. Now, towards the end of that Civil War, no, it wasn't, it was early on, my father and mother got married during it. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't involved actively in the Civil War fighting, but just by association, he was on the more Republican side of keeping fighting to get the rest as well. And his younger brother had married the sister of the man who appears in the Michael Collins movie, Harry Boland. So when my parents were having their wedding reception, there were gunmen on the stairs in case people were coming looking for Harry Boland, and they got him when they were away on the honeymoon. So when they came back. So there were these kind of... See, when you grow up in this whole thing, when I was at school, I was at a very Irish nationalistic school of Christian brothers, but on either side of me were people whose families were on different sides of the Civil War. What they all shared was this deep devotion to the tradition of Irish history and Irish literature, the Celtic background and all the rest of it. So there's a whole very complex history. What have I left out, Paul?
That's just about everything, I think. Boys, does anyone have any questions? Just about... Yep, Henry?
What is an internment camp?
Like the concentration camps, except that they weren't as savage. They were just put in prison. In prison, but not, they didn't call it prison, they just put them in a camp. And you were just kept out of the way. In fact, Dad liked to tell the story of up in that camp. They had to go when they were cleaning up the toilets or something like that. One fellow had the duty of cleaning the toilets, and every now and then he had to go up and ask for a special for disinfectant stuff they used. And a very famous one when I was growing up was called Jay's Fluid. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was J-E-Y-E-S, Jay's Fluid, which was the cleaning stuff. And this fellow wasn't a well-educated fellow, but he'd go up and ask the guard, he'd say, excuse me sir, can I have some Jesus Fluid please? And in Ireland they say Jesus for Jesus. So he lifted his cap to the man, and this fella thought he was being terribly polite and was always very nice to him. So all these stories come up. But it wasn't, I think they weren't badly treated in that sense, but they were just being detained, kept out of the, kept away. Yes?
Just when you said that a warship came up the river when they were in building the forecourts, what kind of ship was that? Like a First World War?
I think, I was trying to think, was warship the right word? It was a military boat. It wasn't a big warship, I think. But it meant that they probably had the long distance guns. You know, they could send shells, things like that around, and they weren't expecting that. And they really only had rifles. You know, they managed to get a few rifles and they thought they'd be doing this. Pearce, at the end, after about 5 or 6 days, he knew it was a hopeless cause and just thought they called it off. But actually what they did to Connolly, who was the socialist who started the citizen army, he was wounded in that post office area. He was severely wounded. And they actually, I thought about doing the wrong thing, they took him out on a stretcher. And they took him out on a stretcher to have him executed.
When the fighting went on, was it sort of predominantly religious groups who were fighting? Or
No.
or is it like the Irish, just as a group?
No, it really is. The religious thing was there because they took the land. They gradually got rid of the language. So the land and the language and the religion were all being attacked. So it was just a deep desire to have our land. It's our land, and it's our culture, and it's a Celtic culture. So Devon Laird had as one of his main things, we're going to be all speaking Irish in 50 years' time again. So to protect the land, protect the culture, and of course to protect the religion. Now I've got a bit confused a bit because, as I told you, the official church was against Parnell, but very strongly in favour of the freedom of Catholics, of course. So it was a mixture of all three things. So it wasn't, it was the Ulster Unionists who happened to be really strongly Protestant people as well, you know. In the north of Ireland from 1922, when founded settlement came in and the border went in, up in Belfast University between 1920 and 1970, there were only 3 graduates, Catholic graduates in engineering. Loads of jobs of in engineering up there. They were one of the biggest shipyards in the world, but Catholic, you wouldn't get a job. And up to 1970, that's why the new IRA people got away with so much for a while. Up to 1970, where there was a large Catholic majority in certain areas of the north, they gerrymandered elections. You know what gerrymandering is? You rig the election so that, say, in this area where a council is ruling this whole area, if there's a large number of Catholics, they give them 1 seat only, and then somewhere where there's a large number of Protestants, you give them 5 seats. You know, so a lot of that stuff happened even afterwards. So that dimension was there the whole time. But it was also just the sheer my land, and it's very strongly the culture.
Any other questions, boys?
Yes.
So just what was the Irish language? So
I mean, not just great Inish. I was in the fucking with our album. I said, I'm speaking Gaelic now, you don't understand a word I'm saying. That's what I said. Celtic language. The Celts came to Ireland 300 or 400 years BC, and it's the Scots and Welsh and Irish are all Celtic. So there's a real, and the dominant English were Anglo-Saxon. So one does talk about, you know, you can exaggerate those things, but there is something that's deep down, depending on your action. That's why I often say, if white Australians are not interested in their ethnic background, white Australians have very shallow roots. Do you understand why I say that? If you only think of yourself as a white Australian, and of course the apples, all that kind of stuff too, but if you think of yourself just as an Irish, as a white Australian, as Australian, what have you got in your history? What big things stand out in your history for you?
We've only got like 2 generations.
Well, Ned Kelly and Gallipoli. Sort of. So that's why I think history is such a terribly important subject. If we don't understand our history, we don't understand ourselves. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We'd like to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah.